Welcome to Sanford on Security, where each episode, American Security Council Foundation Senior Analyst Lawrence Sanford brings you the latest in national security news and events. Mr. Sanford served as a communications officer aboard a destroyer in the U.S. Pacific Fleet, followed by 4 years as an officer in the clandestine services of the CIA. If you would like to support the American Security Council Foundation, please visit www.ascf.us. Thanks so much and have a great day.
Good day. I'm Lawrence Sanford. I'm Senior Analyst with the American Security Council Foundation here in Florida. And with me is Joy Votrobek, who is the Director of Operations at the American Security Council Foundation. And we're going to have a conversation in regards to clean energy. Green energy is not so clean. And so Joy will ask me a few questions that she has generated based on her conversation and readings on the subject, and discuss my article, which was published on our website and is in process of being published in other publications. So I would start with Joy's first question.
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me on your show, Sanford on Security. You all may remember me from hosting Protecting Our Freedoms here at the American Security Council Foundation. And today, like Larry said, I'm going to interview him on his latest article, Green Energy is Not So Clean. So to start out with, first of all, from an individual's perspective, is clean energy a long-time viable source for the individual?
The individual, my nephew, who's a PhD in engineering, uses the term individual bubble. And the individual bubble is that if you have a solar panel rooftop, that is good for you. If you drive an electric Tesla with the batteries, probably that's good for you in the individual bubble. But the cost of generating those solar panels on your roof, or the cost of the lithium batteries or whatever kind of batteries there are in the Tesla or other electronic vehicles, from a societal viewpoint, is not so good. And I would start off by saying, first of all, just to make the solar panels, the windmill blades, the batteries, requires rare earth minerals. China dominates rare earth mineral processing and manufacturing. Many of the rare earths come out of Africa, where China has contracted basically slave labor, 12-year-olds, Africans, to mine these materials and ship them to China for processing. And in China, the processing of these chemicals, minerals, pollutes water, pollutes the air, is a real environmental issue. Also, mining of many of the rare earth materials is in Xinjiang, which is the home of the Muslim minorities, where China has concentration camps and uses them basically as slave labor. So the processing of the rare earth minerals and the processing and the manufacturing cycle are environmentally very bad. So when you go beyond the processing stage, then you get into the manufacturing stage. China dominates windmill blades, they dominate solar panels, they dominate the batteries. So here we are in America, the #1 energy country in the world, stifling our independence, stifling our prosperity so we can become dependent upon China. It doesn't make any sense to me at all, especially since the green energy per se doesn't make sense in other environmental issues. Windmills, thousands of birds are killed every year. Eagles, bats, birds, migratory patterns are all killed by windmills. Yet you never hear the environmentalists talking about that. I mean, the Sierra Club is very much against nuclear energy, which is the cleanest, safest source of energy. And all they never talk about the birds and the environmental issues of windmill blades.
You jumped into my next question, actually.
Okay.
But you're on track here with, I was going to say, is it safe to say that the amount of land it takes to build solar panels, windmills, and the backup storage for the batteries takes away from land that could be used as a sanctuary for animals and birds?
Precisely. If windmills were to dominate our source of energy, it would require 2 states of California for all the land that they consume. They consume tremendous quantities of land. A nuclear power plant is 1/500th the land size of a windmill farm to produce the same amount of energy, assuming the wind is blowing. Europe last summer had a terrible power problem because the wind didn't blow. Even on the ocean, the wind didn't blow. And Germany has made a major commitment for offshore wind farming. The wind wasn't blowing. So what did the Germans have to do? They had to fire up those coal plants because they don't have any natural gas resources the way America does. And speaking of natural gas resources, the U.S. is the largest source of natural gas. And I'm originally from Boston. And Boston imports natural gas from Russia because the states of New York and Massachusetts and New England will not allow the building of pipelines from Pennsylvania, which has tons of natural gas, to cross state lines to get into the Boston metro to feed people. And New York City has just banned, I think maybe the state even, has banned natural gas hookups. And they're sitting on top of one of the great natural gas sources in America, but they refuse to allow fracking in New York State. The politics involved in this whole energy thing is, to me, unbelievable. I mean, if you believe in America, you want America to succeed, you would have policies that make Americans prosperous and energy independent. But no.
And specifically at this point, we don't want to be dependent upon Russia and natural energy.
And look at Europe right now.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So you already touched on basically the environmental concerns with even this green energy as solar and wind. Do you believe most green energy ideas are actually really hurting the environment?
Well, it's like believing in mom and apple pie. I believe in green energy. I believe that if we should do some solar stuff, we should do some wind stuff. But for the base source of our electricity, you're going to need fossil fuels is incorrect. They're not fossil fuels. They're carbon-based fuels. Fossil fuels means they come from animals. That's a misnomer. They use the term fossil. So they're carbon-based fuels of oil, gas. And you're going to need that. There's no way that the government's plan to go electric, to go renewables by 2040 or whatever, 20, isn't going to happen. Right now, the energy sources in America, 20% of all the energy in America comes from nuclear, and it represents 50% of the carbon-free energy. 10% comes from wind and solar, 25% of carbon-free. 10% from hydro and geothermal. Hydro are dams and geothermal, hot water from the earth. They're another 10% and 25% of the carbon-free. So 100% of the carbon-free, 50 from nuclear, 25 from wind and solar, and 25 from geothermal. Fossil fuels account for 60% of all the energy in America and 0% of the carbon-free. But America has decreased its carbon output in the last 20 years, primarily because of fracking of the natural gas. So the U.S. is way ahead of the curve as far as the rest of the world is concerned in reducing carbon emissions. And, the relationship between carbon and climate change, one can make studies and statistics, but it's open still, in my opinion, as to how much of a relationship there is between carbon and climate change. Climate has been changing for 4 billion years. And to attribute it to man-made, maybe not, but the proof isn't it to me. And when I hear, the models, the economic models, the computers say this, how often do you believe in the weather forecast? And they can't predict sometimes 24 hours in advance. So for them to say 10 years down the road or 20 years down, maybe I'm willing to look at it and think about it. But for us to sacrifice our independence, and not only the economic security, but the mission of American Security Council is to educate and engage Americans on national security, economic security, and moral leadership. And without energy, our national security situation is at risk. And so I don't understand this hell-bent drive to drive away our energy from carbon-based fuels to green energy when one is cost prohibitive, it takes up land, it doesn't work, and the sun doesn't shine 24 hours a day. And in the winter, solar panels in the northern states, their efficiency is down as low as 10%. So you're going to need fossil carbon fuels, and you're going to need nuclear fuels to fund and support American society now and in the future.
And that gets right into my next question, which you pretty much have answered, but some people have said that the Texas freeze could have been avoided if we were using I won't say fossil fuels, carbon fuels.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are, I don't know. I just don't know what could have happened. I was surprised when I first read about it, how dependent Texas is on the wind.
Yes, I was surprised too.
Here they are, the source of the natural gas, oil and gas. So I'm surprised. And there's a lot of sun down in Texas, so I'm surprised they're not more into the solar. And I don't think Texas has a nuclear power plant. They might. There are a total of 56 nuclear power plants in America with 93 reactors. But most of them are up north or along the East Coast. So
that was one of my questions as well. I mean, going along with maybe it could have, maybe it couldn't have been avoided if we're more dependent upon the carbon fuels, or maybe a mixture thereof, or even nuclear.
Yeah.
Would you propose that we should look more into doing more nuclear in the future?
Yes, I definitely think that's the way to go. And looking at the past, the cost of a nuclear power plant is in the billions. There's only 2 nuclear power plants under construction in America right now, both of them in Georgia at one plant. And their initial estimate was like 12 billion. They're at 27 billion and counting. And hopefully we'll be online within the next year. But in the meantime, so we have 2 new plants coming online in addition to the 90 that we have. But we have 20 in process of being decommissioned. And so the 20% of American energy from nuclear is rapidly going to decrease as a percentage of all these decommissionings.
Why are they being decommissioned?
They're not financially viable competing with gas.
Okay.
And also, the average age of a nuclear plant in America is 39 years age, 39. So it requires maintenance. The costs are going up on those, but you can extend the life of them up to 60 years. And so when you say that nuclear is expensive, I have an MBA in finance. You can twist numbers around any way you want. And so if you look at the lifespan of a nuclear plant, say over 60 years, the cost goes down per year versus, say, the lifespan was 20. And so the numbers indicate, depending upon how you want to read the numbers, that it is not only the most efficient because it runs 24/7, don't have to worry about the wind. And another thing, like in hydro dams, depends upon water. Look at what's happening in the Southwest. The Colorado River is drying up.
Yes, right.
So Arizona, Nevada, LA, they're all going to be hurting big time when it comes to water sources. Another advocate for nuclear would be that they're great as far as desalinization.
I was just thinking about the one you said LA. They have a desalination plant, I believe, yes.
But
they're expensive to run, though.
They're expensive, but they're expensive because of the power requirements. So if you have a nuclear plant right next door to them, there's a whole different thing. So older nuclear power plants are expensive, and the technology involved in them at 39 years of age is different than the technology today. So the technology coming down the pike now is called small modular reactors, SMRs. And SMR technology is sort of a construction plant. You build a module you transport it, and you build it on site. It's sort of like a manufactured home versus building a home on a property. Because each individual nuclear plant nowadays had to be approved by the regulatory authorities. Lawsuits, regulations, it takes forever. It takes 10, 20 years to build a plant because of all the regulations. Whereas if you do the SMR route is you're going to approve the basic modular, and then you can manufacture those modulars and move them around. So the costs come down dramatically. And also the smaller size. And one of the things people talk about is the safety of nuclear power. There has not been one death in America from a nuclear accident. The United States Navy since the 1950s has been operating nuclear power plants on their ships, submarines, and aircraft carriers, all in the Navy's fleet today are nuclear powered, and there's been no accidents that I know of, or certainly if there were, we'd all have heard about it. The one incident we had in America was the 3 Mile Island, and the New York Post has published an article saying that it could have been a lot worse, but for this and but for that. I don't know. All I know is no one died. They shut it down, and plants have been operating now in America for all these years, and there's been no serious incident. The only place that caused deaths was in Chernobyl in the old Soviet Union, which is now Ukraine.
And under attack.
Yeah. And that plant was different than any plant in America. It was a plant that not only provided electricity, but it was also a bomb-making facility. The uranium used in civilian use is developed to a certain degree. To make a military-grade uranium, you have to process it differently. So this plant was different than anything in America, and supposedly all the other plants that were designed along the Chernobyl lines in the Soviet Union or Russia now have safeguards that they didn't have back in the 70s. Okay. And think about it, in the 70s, that's 40 or 50 years ago. Think about the progress we've made in society just with computers alone in the last 40 years. So when you talk about technology, technologies are changing in the nuclear. Right now, everything...
Safety would be one aspect. What about the nuclear waste side of it?
Waste. Since the beginning in America of all the plants in America, you could take all the waste and fit them on a football field.
Okay.
In 50-foot high containers. So waste is an issue. I certainly wouldn't want that container in my backyard. Right. But it's a political issue. The U.S. government spent $7 billion in Yucca Flats in Nevada, outside of Las Vegas, 40 or 50 miles north, building into a stable geographic area, mines to store it. Harry Reid was the Senate Majority Leader from Nevada, and he nixed the $7 billion utilization. So $7 billion went down into the mine, but they never was able to use it as a storage facility. So what happens now is when a nuclear plant has the waste, they store it on site. So now you have 56 nuclear sites with storage. I mean, I think I'd rather have one facility out in the middle of the desert, down in a mine, than having it stored on site. And then you have all the nuclear waste from hospitals, all the radiation, all that stuff. Huge problem. What do you do with it? So the waste issue is a political issue more than it is a technical issue. The U.S. government stores its military uranium waste in a site in New Mexico, and they've been doing that, and that costs $15 billion. And that one is being used, and so far there's been no there's been a couple of leaking tanks type of thing, but it's been confined to smaller issues. And if you look at the waste in developing oil, or waste in developing a solar blade or solar panels, there's all sorts of manufacturing waste, and really highly toxic chemicals go into the building of these things. So there's all sorts of other waste. And with a 20-year lifespan on the solar panels and the wind blades, these things can't be recycled. So we're going to have a huge issue of landfill coming down the road. What do you do with all this stuff loaded with hazardous minerals? and materials. So there's
So
no
this
there's
clean
no free
energy
lunch.
is not really clean
Yeah.
if we have a lot of toxic waste to deal with.
Precise. Yeah, there's no such thing as a free lunch. And the
Mm-hmm.
sun is free, but after that, it costs a lot of money to maintain it.
So for the individual, it's probably not a bad idea to have the solar panels.
Yeah.
But for the public in general, and as a national security issue, as you're talking about,
Yeah.
something we need to rethink.
Yeah, California celebrated they were 100% energy independent just within the last week or two for maybe an hour because of the sun and the wind and everything else came together. But what happens when the sun goes down? They still have to depend upon the base power of nuclear and carbon fuels. As a matter of fact, California was in process of terminating its sole nuclear plant, and Newsom, the governor, is reconsidering it because it might present problems with. California now has rolling blackouts and stuff. So.
And what about the storage of this energy that when the sun's available, they have to store it, correct?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Is that a problem? I mean, and it could be an issue.
Sun goes down, they have batteries, but the batteries are only good for a short period of time. And to build new batteries is, again, we're getting back to rare earth materials. So battery backups for solar and wind are not even close to being suitable to solve the energy needs of America. Not even close. And expensive and take up a lot of room. So.
And in summary, I think your article suggested that we cannot meet our energy needs with just the solar and wind alone.
No, not at all. So to balance, my recommendation, and I think I shouldn't say most, my recommendation is that we have a balance of nuclear, fossil, rooftop panels, and some wind. But not only do the birds get affected with the wind, humans do. In Australia, the Supreme Court in one of the states down there just banned this wind farm because it was so disruptive to the humans living nearby. The constant noise.
Oh, wow.
And the pollution of the environment and the birds. Of course, the birds and the bats are all being killed big time. So I'm not a big fan of wind at all. Solar, I can see that coming down the road. But again, I'm concerned about our dependency upon China.
Yeah.
Why would we give up our own independence to depend upon China is beyond me.
Yeah, that's definitely a national security issue. And I agree with the rare earth mineral thing is definitely something that needs to be looked at. Since I believe, my understanding is we use a lot of it in our own military equipment.
Yes.
So I think it should be come back here and be manufactured.
Yeah, I agree. So.
Any other parting words?
No, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, thank you very much for having me on your show today.
No, thank you. I'm glad to be here.